Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today we have a special guest, Amy Watson. She is the founder of HASSL, and HASSL does some very important work around the country, around the world, regarding women, their safety against sexual harassment, sexual assault, and stalking. And so, Amy, I'm going to go ahead and just pass it over to you to introduce yourself and what HASSL is and does.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me. It's great to be on and talking to you. So HASSL is a global movement and social enterprise, which is all about tackling harassment at the root. So it's all about prevention rather than kind of dealing with it after the fact. And a big part of what we do is invite men to be part of the solution. So it's all about redirecting that responsibility for personal safety away from women as individuals and trying to move it into being a societal responsibility. Involving men, involving organizations, businesses, and not expecting women to carry even more mental load, financial burden, all those kind of things that come along with trying to keep ourselves safe. So yeah.
Right. That's great. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. I know your organization is fairly new. You
Yeah.
all were founded about a year ago, right? In 2024.
Yeah, it was end of October 2024. So yeah, we're just about 14 months now. And I'd started it when I was basically on holiday bored and because I can't relax. So I was like, now that I've finally come on holiday from my busy job, I'll, start working on a social enterprise in my downtime. So yeah, I started working on it when I was on holiday in sort of the end of September, and then it just grew really quickly, and I ended up quitting my job after about 2 months after I started. So yeah, I kind of thought, oh, I'll do this for a couple of years before, you know, be very sensible, do it for a couple of years alongside my full-time job that I really enjoyed. And yeah, it just, in a good way and a bad way, because obviously it indicates how big the problem is and how much demand there is for it, but also we managed to reach a lot of people really quickly. So yeah.
Amazing. And what was the inspiration? I know that here in the United States, it's a major problem where prevention gets forgotten and is not considered the most important area. But what was the inspiration for you to begin Hassle?
I always say this kind of, I guess, a longer story and a shorter story. So I guess my whole life, I've always been really interested in all kinds of social issues and, always felt, I guess, a pull to do something about one of the many problems in the world. And I've always, my belief in prevention doesn't just relate to this issue. I think all social issues we should be looking at more from a systemic tackle root causes um kind of strategy rather than a lot of the time what we do is obviously deal with it after it happens or try and kind of plaster over the problems rather than actually preventing it in the first place. So yeah, I always just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then I was also really interested in, well, I didn't know what it was when I was younger, but I guess became entrepreneurship. Like I just always liked doing a bit of everything. I always had to have a project. And then I guess as I got older, kind of realized that it lent itself well to that side of things. So at university, I did my degree in entrepreneurship and then ended up, I guess, finding out about the concept of social enterprise. Like when I went to university, it wasn't, I think now it's a bit more well known what social enterprises are and but it was quite a new concept to me anyway. And that was when I was like, that's what I'm supposed to have a social enterprise because it was kind of the perfect hybrid between two things that I guess was passionate about and felt like I had the skills to do. So I guess that's like the longer story, backstory. But then for me, no, I moved to London about 5 years ago. I'm originally from the north of England, but now live in London. And I think there's a lot more people in London. It heightened the problem. It was happening so frequently, not just to me, but to my friends, to colleagues, like, coming into work and being like, oh, this just happened to me on the train into work or whatever. And then I guess it was almost like I was looking at it from what's the word? Almost like I wasn't really there, like an out of body thing where I was like, we're all just talking about this like it's so normal and so accepted, and we're laughing off that a man followed us to work, but that's actually not normal or okay. Like it's so, bizarre how we've been conditioned so much to just talk about it in this way, especially as women. And yeah, and then as I say, it was just kind of having those conversations time and time again, seeing how normalized it was, seeing how frequent it was, especially when you hear it from younger women as well, and you think back to being in your teens and those kind of things happening. And yeah, I always kind of say, I guess the tipping point for me was when I was managing a team and having women come in and be like, this happened to me today, and then just having to get on with their day. That's when I was really like, I think I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like I need to do something about it. So yeah, that as I say, personally, I've had a lot of experiences, but also just hearing those stories and hearing how much it's normalized and that kind of thing was the tipping point. And yeah, I'd been building the idea in my head for a while. And then when I went on holiday, was like the first time I'd had a break from work. And I was like, now's a good time to start, not have a
Hmm.
rest, but I'll do this instead. So yeah, it wasn't, yeah, I guess it was always kind of meant to be, or that's how I feel anyway. I feel like everything that I've kind of experienced and my everything I've learned and my skills and stuff have kind of perfectly led me to this point now where I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to to tackle this problem. So yeah, that's I guess the long-ish story of how it came to be.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, I truly understand myself as the founder of Title IX Consulting Group when all the things that happen in your life really inspire the
Yeah,
creation of a company. So I truly do understand that. And for everyone out there, please remember to like and subscribe to us as you're listening and watching and leave a comment. Um, but something interesting you just mentioned, Amy, is those stories of women. I know
mhm.
that for Title IX Consulting Group, it's a big reason and a big driver as to what we do. I
Yeah,
know that women are always, and myself included, sharing stories that many
yeah,
people don't hear about. And sometimes I think other women sometimes doubt when it doesn't happen to them.
yeah.
And I think that impacts and influences the prevention efforts in many, many ways. I know that I was at dinner with a friend of mine just last week or 2 weeks ago, and we were just sharing stories of things that have happened to us over our lives.
Yeah,
Things for me, for example, that I'll share with you now. And, I'm going to ask you a question, but, you know, as you said, being followed home, being followed on the freeway, someone exposing themselves on the freeway and masturbating as they're driving right next to you. That happened to me in my 20s. I was almost abducted by two men when I was a teenager. Had to fight them off. My friend was talking about three men um, following her and her son for
mm,
an attempted kidnapping of her and her son. I've had other friends, jogging, men
mm,
popping out of bushes, exposing themselves. Um, where you work. Also, examples of men saying, let's go get a hotel room and thinking that's okay, uh,
yeah,
following them afterward. And so, what types of things do you all do to remove the responsibility from women? Because we're always told, okay, don't forget to have something sharp on you, run, get
yeah,
help, don't be alone. Try not to be out in the dark too, don't walk in the alleyway by yourself. Um, and you talked about putting that responsibility back on men. So what does
yeah.
HASSL do?
So I guess there's like two sides to it. So firstly, like you said, it's kind of almost unlearning or encouraging women to unlearn those safety tips and safety rules a lot of the time because they're often very contradictory to one another. So they don't actually keep you any safer. Like we did a campaign recently that was all the kind of different contradictions. You're told get in a taxi because then someone can track you, but then it's like, but then you're alone in a vehicle with a man. Whereas on public transport, at least there's other people around. But also on public transport, it still happens. Or there's so many things that we're told to do to keep ourselves safe when a lot of those messages are also contradictory. And the problem that that happens with that, as you know, is that then younger girls especially, but women in general will then internalize when something does happen to them. They will blame themselves because we've always been told these are all the rules. If you stick to the rules, even though none of the rules, they all contradict one another, but if you stick to the rules, it won't happen to you. So that's kind of the first thing is we try and like build the awareness around that. And it's not to say that, there's never any responsibility for your own personal safety, but it's the disproportionate amount burden that is placed on women when it comes to their personal safety because of the disproportionate amount of sexual violence and incidents like many you've just mentioned there that happen to us. So that's kind of the first side of it. And, also there is women who will perpetuate that narrative. They will maybe pass on even subconsciously those messages to their own daughters or children, or they will victim blame other women. And I sometimes think that is almost a defense mechanism because it kind of makes you think that, okay, if I blame that woman because she didn't do enough, then it won't happen to me because I know what to do. And so I think it's unlearning all of that side of stuff, which is more of the work around women generally, everyone to an extent, but women generally. And then on the other side, it's very much inviting men to be part of the solution. So we basically have a 5-stage plan, and we're launching all different initiatives that focus on like essentially education, prevention, training, all those kind of things. So, and it's about kind of giving men especially tools to be part of the solution rather than getting women to teach men, which still puts the burden onto women to do the educating. It's about actually creating stuff. So our next launch, which is in like 2 weeks, we're launching free online education resources. So we've got courses, activities, conversation prompts, all different things, primarily designed for men. So how can I do better as a man? A course on how to open up conversations carefully with women in your life to better understand the scale of what happens to them. All different things like that, essentially. And it's the focus is on men and boys so that men don't come up and say, well, how can I help? Or I don't want to get it wrong, because we have that a lot. We have men say, I don't want to speak over women, or I don't want to seem like I'm speaking for them. I want to help. I recognize it's a problem. Then we've got other men who are kind of like, is it a problem? I'm not really sure. No one talks to me about it. And it's trying to meet men where they are, essentially on a scale, and shift them up a little bit on that scale over time through not just education resources. We offer workplace training where we talk a lot about this kind of stuff as well. Unlearning misogyny, bystander intervention, all that kind of stuff. Longer term, our goal is to launch reporting tech to change the way that reporting is done, because that still affects the prevention side of things, because we've got repeat offenders that just keep offending rather than it not happening in the first place. And obviously, there's huge barriers to reporting from so many different ones, and I won't go into them all, but that's kind of the end goal, is to build something like that. But on the journey, it is all about, I say, as much education as possible, moving that burden not only onto men as individuals, but we also are working a lot of partnerships with different like public transport, different industries, especially male-dominated industries, things like construction, utilities, that kind of stuff. So really trying to focus in on men and organizations and businesses footing the financial bill, taking on the burden of education, if that's what you want to call it, and just trying to strip away slowly the burden that's placed on women and has been placed on women throughout all of time, pretty much. So yeah,
Yeah.
nice and easy, but that's the plan. And so far it's been very well received, which has been amazing. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. And is it well received primarily in Europe? Is it well
So
received in the United States? Like, what areas have you seen the biggest outcry for? Come over. We want to do this with you.
yeah, so we have reach in over 120 countries. We have a basically online global volunteer program that we have over 3,000 volunteers signed up for. And the biggest audiences are UK and US are pretty much neck and neck. And then India's our second or third-ish biggest I guess community of ambassadors. And then we have Australia's very big, Canada's very big, but we literally have countries, yeah, all over the world, all continents. I think it very much highlights how much of a universal issue it is. It happens in different forms, and there's different, cultural and other challenges to navigate, but it's the same thing, regardless of religion, wealth, progressiveness of a country. We've got um yeah, I guess countries that are deemed some of the most progressive in the world that we still have ambassadors for, that still have all these experiences and say this is a major problem here. Um, so yeah, it's a big challenge, but I always wanted to try and approach it from a global perspective, as much as that is not the easiest thing to do, because I feel like we live in such a, well, we live in such a, globalized world, if that's what you want to call it. People are constantly moving around, people migrate, people study abroad, people travel, and we don't solve this problem by solving it in one country. Like, that's not going to solve the problem. It needs this whole collective kind of culture shift across the world. And yeah, I know that's not easy, but I want to do things properly. I want to do things the way that I think they should be done, even if it makes it a lot harder, because I don't think we solve the problem for anyone until we solve it for everyone. So that's kind of the approach that we take. But yeah, our reach is really, really global, and it's been amazing. We just have so much representation in terms of languages, religions, backgrounds, cultures. Um, yeah, it's been like a whole learning experience for me as well, to find out even more about different challenges and stuff. So yeah.
That is fabulous. That is fabulous. I love it. As far as Title IX Consulting Group goes, we primarily focus on the United States. We are going into other countries for the Title IX aspects.
Yeah.
Um, but within the United States, because of Title IX, I think that the services and resources that you're describing would be and would go a long way, uh,
Yeah.
especially for men, because the conversation pieces around men are just so limited many times
Yeah.
on campuses and at schools. So, are some of the programming that you have for campuses and schools as well? And are those, you mentioned there's a lot of free programming you're placing. Is it all free? Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about?
So the online courses that we are launching in a couple of weeks are all free. I've always said that anything that goes to the public is going to be free to use, because again, I don't want there to be any, I don't think safety should be a privilege. I don't think there should be barriers to women being saved for men to do better. Like, there's already enough real world barriers. I don't want to create more. And yeah, I guess it's about creating a path of least resistance and trying to get people to where they need to be and giving them the tools that are actually accessible and that kind of thing. So yeah, everything is free. Our workplace training is costs businesses, and then that helps us to keep other things free. But everything that's like public facing is free to access and use. Same with our volunteer program, it's free to join. There's no kind of minimum time commitment and stuff. It's just about doing whatever suits your skill set and whatever you can contribute. But yeah, we are working on projects for university campuses as well. One of the one of the intentions with the online resources is that not just ambassadors, but teachers, parents, etc., can also use those resources in schools and like within their own communities and things like that. At some point, when we get to that point, I want to be able to make in-person delivery of stuff, something that we offer. But right now, it means that at least ambassadors and the wider population can take our free resources and at least go into their own, whether it's friendship group, whether it's colleagues at work, whatever it is, and just take even one of those activities and say, can we do this on lunch break, or can you give us an hour to do this, half an hour to do this? They're really designed to try and make you shift your thinking to kind of be really accessible and not to feel accusatory or boring, but actually just almost feel like a game that actually kind of changes your perspective. That's the intention behind the design. And then we've got a lot of ambassadors that have been testing the resources before they go live to the public. So especially men, which has been amazing. A lot of our male ambassadors have been testing to make sure they feel accessible and yeah, just make sense and speak to men. I'm not a man, obviously, so yeah, I want to make sure that they are as yeah, as kind of effective as possible when they go live. So our ambassadors have been amazing testing and leaving feedback and things like that.
That's amazing. And would you say that you have more male ambassadors or more female ambassadors?
We have more female ambassadors, but purely because I always knew when I started HASSL that I'd have to get women on board first with the concept and with the messaging. I thought if I create an account, socials account that goes straight into men, it's not going to grow, it's not going to get anywhere. So we started with a lot more kind of relatable content for women and brought in, I guess, the people who are now like our biggest advocates. And over time, we've started to move the content more male focused and more kind of, and that's always been the plan. So over time, more and more of the content will speak to men. Right now, it's speaking to men who are kind of already there, but just don't know how to help. Like they agree that it's a problem, but they don't want to get it wrong. And then over time, we want to kind of move almost down that scale. So the next one of maybe they're a nice, empathetic man, but maybe they don't particularly recognize it as an issue yet, and then start to kind of keep working our way down that scale. So rather than trying to go in, initially, if I just created an account to target, far right incel men about feminism, nothing would happen. No one would obviously follow or care. So it's kind of a gradual thing. And, over time, as more men join our ambassador program, as they create content, as men see themselves within our community, it's that gradual shift. So at some point, I would like to be, roughly 50-50. I mean, we have people of all genders as well, but yeah, in terms of when we're speaking about women's safety and inviting men, ideally we get to that point eventually, but yeah, it was always designed to be that way because I knew that if we went for men first, it wouldn't work. So
Mhm.
a lot of the men that I guess were the first ones to start were people who maybe got sent it by partners or siblings or whatever. And now we've found a lot more men that have just found us kind of by themselves, I guess. So it's definitely been effective. But yeah, we started kind of pushing the men's side of things a couple of months ago. We've got more than 500 men now that are signed up to volunteer with us, which we have monthly calls, they test resources, they even just like send me things that they've heard other men talking about to be like, okay, we need to debunk this on social media, or we need to, build some resources around this or whatever. So yeah, they've been so helpful, and I think it's just a momentum thing. As I say, the momentum is just picking up now, which is amazing, and it definitely restores your faith a little bit after hearing so many awful stories and experiences. It's yes, amazing to see men like really stepping up and committing time to
That is
help.
amazing. That is very amazing. Um, I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about one of the education programs that you do
Yeah,
have for men and boys,
yeah,
because one of our last guests was from Consent Awareness Network.
yeah.
And we
Okay.
talked about how consent does not really have a definition around the globe that is
Mhm.
agreed upon, and even in the United States, there is no legal definition for consent.
Yeah,
And I think that's really at the root of men and boys being able to understand when something is inappropriate
yeah,
or appropriate. So, can you talk to us a little bit about an education program that you have
yeah,
and your thoughts surrounding consent as well?
yeah. So our tool our education resources are a lot more sort of tools based than I guess like we don't focus too much on kind of like legal side of things, policy, that kind of thing, because I feel like there's a lot of that information out there. These are more day-to-day tools to actually educate yourself. And as I say, trying to come from an angle of like they're quite chatty and quite informal, and they're more about building life skills rather than saying don't do this because it's against the law. That's not to me how we really like move the needle. It's actually getting men to care about this and to actually understand our lived experiences and actually put themselves in our shoes and all that kind of stuff. Um, so one of the courses we have is called Opening Up Conversations, and it's basically primarily designed for men to go to women that they have good relationships with and start to open up conversations. And obviously, like we set all the ground rules, we say, like these are the people to ask and not ask, these are the kind of initial questions, and like we give suggestions, things like I've seen this campaign, like a HASSL campaign, for example. I've seen this campaign, it made me rethink, like I've never really thought about this before. Have you seen it? Is it maybe something you could relate to? And like, how can you approach that topic without going in and being like, tell me all your deepest, darkest trauma? Because obviously that's not what we want to hear either. But we know that it's really effective when men hear real life stories, especially when they hear it from people that they care about and that they are in the vicinity of every single day. It's something we do in workplace training a lot, where women end up volunteering stories because that's kind of the relationship we build throughout the training. And then it hits a lot harder when the men in the room are sat there hearing these stories, being like, I literally work with these people every day. I've never heard this before. It shifts mindsets a lot more than just being like, this is the law. This is, because a lot of the time it isn't really about, it's still a small proportion of people who are actually doing, like, perpetrating, especially the worst forms of violence. It's more everyone else who is enabling it to an extent or not helping raise younger boys better and all that kind of stuff. So it's trying to, yeah, give people the tools to do all of those, have those conversations. What are the conversation prompts? How do I approach this without intruding? And it's there's a sort of bits at every point that's like, okay, if there's any resistance, like then you step away, you don't, like, this is other angles that you can take, or this is other people you can have these conversations with, or all that kind of stuff. And it is, yeah, like our one about opening up conversations is basically to try and just understand, like, even if someone doesn't want to divulge any personal experiences, we even give like prompts for women once they've been approached and agreed to have some kind of conversation about this. Say it's with your partner, for example, where you can say, oh, I know someone who this happened to, even if it's your own story, if you don't want to share that, but you can say, oh, a girl I know, or my friend, or, giving people all these kind of little prompts and things to actually have those conversations, and not without having to kind of talk about really, and at some point you might get to that point, but it's kind of taking people through that journey. And yeah, so we have all different courses kind of based on where you sit on the scale. So obviously the one about opening up conversations, that's more where you're towards the upper end of the scale. You're like aware of the problem and you kind of want to better understand it. But we have one that's like feminism is toxic, blah 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 blah, and that's more aimed at, men who really don't like what we're doing and try to kind of shift their thinking, and again help them realize that what we're doing benefits them too, even if they don't care about women being safe. So yeah, it's a lot more of a kind of mindset shift, tools, that kind of thing. I feel like to an extent there's a lot of information out there from a technical perspective, and that's great and they're important, but I felt like there wasn't enough stuff, especially aimed at men, that gave them the tools day to day. We get messages all the time being like, I want to help, but I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to seem like I'm, speaking on behalf of women, or I don't want to pry too much, or I don't want, well, I feel like I'm a bit stuck. And that's our first focus, because they're the men who are ready to help, but they just need those tools to get it right, kind of thing. So yeah.
That's fabulous. I love that. I think that those conversation pieces really go a long way. I've
Yeah.
seen that at certain campuses here years ago, where there would be men groups having dialogue to
Yeah.
simply discuss and
Those
see,
conversations.
yeah, to see what things that they've heard, what things that they've seen, and have like women join the conversation to share their experiences.
Yeah,
And usually it's so powerful when it's a male leading that group that
exactly.
understands it. That's truly when you begin to see it resonating with a lot of the men. Um,
Yeah,
so the approach that you're doing is fabulous. Uh,
thank you.
and I look forward to working with you. I can already see certain things that Title IX Consulting Group could potentially do with your group. And we can talk about that later. But um, yeah, I guess my last question is, so is consent also discussed within any of these education
Yeah,
pieces?
so we have one. Yeah, we have one specifically around consent. Sorry, you did ask that before. Yeah, and so again, like we've had a lot of, parents and teachers especially message us and say, I want to talk about this, but I don't know the right way to communicate it. Or again, it feels very information heavy and law, like this is not okay in this country or whatever, rather than just like, and I think it's more about building empathy so that they don't want to do it regardless of whether it's, whether it's illegal or not, or wherever it stands on that. It's not about gray areas and trying to beat the system kind of thing. It's actually, having that building that empathy for another human being. And this is obviously the problem that for so long, and a lot of kind of online creators and all this kind of stuff that target young boys, they're trying to like build this out of them, out of seeing women as human beings, as people with feelings and emotions and having that empathy. So it's kind of, so our consent one, we do have a course consent around consent, and it's more for parents and teachers to do with younger people. Like we always say, review it first and choose the modules and things that kind of are most age appropriate and whatever. But again, it's trying to use more kind of analogies and things. You've probably seen that there's one about tea, about if you have a cup of tea, and then there's a similar one about a £5 note and things like that, and trying to use those kind of tools and techniques rather than going, this is okay here, this is okay. It's more trying to get them to a point where the only thing they want to hear is an enthusiastic yes, and if it's anything less than that, it's like embarrassing that they even consider progressing with anything, if that makes sense, rather than just saying you shouldn't do this because it's wrong or because it's not, not allowed. Is actually trying to shift that mindset. So yeah, that course is more built for parents, teachers, adults to go through with younger, I guess, boys specifically, but girls too. Like there's that is also part of it, that girls a lot of the time are taught to just accept, or we kind of have this statement that's, you tell girls to accept abusive behavior, and then you blame them when they end up in abusive relationships, because that's literally what we condition girls to accept, very little. And then when girls do end up in these relationships where they are completely taken advantage of or abused or whatever, they're then blamed for being in those relationships. And it's that conditioning piece. So yeah, we're really trying to, as I say, kind of go at it from more of a human angle. I feel like that's kind of what we try and do with everything. I think there's a lot of really good education out there, and I'm not saying that, everything is revolutionary. It's just actually about trying to speak to people on that human level and kind of trying to have that behavior mindset shift rather than just information that goes in one ear and goes back out the other one. So once you've left the room. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, one thing for us, we really strive to focus on the human aspect,
Yeah.
uh, sexual violence, sexual assault prevention, for all of that, because you're right. When it's very focused on the legal aspect, you
Yeah.
lose a lot of people, the eyes start to gloss over, and you're losing everyone. And under Title IX, that's typically like what the main focus is okay, you're not supposed to do it. This is in the law, it's in the
Yeah.
regulations.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. And so we strive to really focus on prevention, and it's been a big
Yeah.
area for us to really push out. So having partners like you is very important.
No, definitely. Like we have one of our courses that's called like, but women have equal rights now, because we get that constantly where men are saying women are equal, so what's the problem? And again, with that, like we did a campaign video recently with our country reps, and they all kind of basically flipped it around. So they said, name a country where women are making the laws about men's bodies, and then they all just did a different flipped. And there's like nowhere in the world where the reverse happens, and it's been a lot more powerful than just saying this is why women don't have equal rights, and and this legally they don't, you know, that doesn't hit people in the same way, or it doesn't make them care. Whereas, that video has done really well, and we've had people message and say, I've never thought about it like this before, but you know, that is wild. And like people are using the sound, like we've had hundreds of people using the sound to make their own videos and this kind of thing. And it's just trying to reframe it in a way that people haven't necessarily thought about it before. It's kind of sometimes the simplest things can make the biggest difference. So yeah, as I say, I don't feel like it's just trying to take a different approach to an existing problem and try to, make sure the focus isn't on women doing more stuff. Essentially, that's what I always say. We're not giving women anything else to do. That's not not the plan. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And rightly so, thank God. I
Yeah,
think
we're
we
glad
handle enough.
exactly.
Um, okay, well, wonderful. I think for today's podcast, I think that that kind of wraps it up for us. Would you like to say any last few words to campuses and schools out there that are thinking about prevention and looking at your website right now?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, in a couple of weeks we're launching, so I'm not sure exactly when this goes out, so they might be out by then. But yeah, we're launching free online education resources that you can use within schools, universities. Um, I'd really encourage students or staff to sign up as ambassadors because they get access to more of these things. They get access to more resources and essentially ways that they can get involved. And yeah, just kind of keep an eye out because we're launching a lot of different partnerships and stuff. We are building our university partnership model right now. So there's lots of really exciting things to come. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And everyone out there, please remember to like and subscribe to us, and we will see you at the next one. Bye.